The opinions and views expressed in the following presentation do not necessarily reflect those of GCR Progressive Internet Radio Management, staff, or our affiliates.
Toto? I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
Welcome to Mo Banshee's Lair, Visionary Talk Radio on GCR Progressive Internet Radio. Fear rocking your world.
Welcome to Mo Banshee's Lair on Game Con Radio, GCR Internet Radio. We played the national anthem for England, and the reason is a son has been born to the House of Windsor. Prince William and the Duchess of Cambridge, Catherine, the former Kate Middleton, gave birth to an 8-pound, 6-ounce baby boy yesterday. And the prince was in attendance. He is in the military, as most of you know. Princess Charles and Camilla, the Duchess of Prince Charles and Camilla, the Duchess of Cornwall, arrived at the hospital today because they let them sit with the baby all day yesterday to bond. I think it's wonderful. All a parent ever hopes for is a healthy child. I don't care who you are. All you want is a healthy child. And praise God, the baby is all right, the mom is all right, and now they can start going through the sleepless nights and all the things that come with being a parent. God bless them. I hope that their lives are much more charmed than the past family, the last 20 years. I'm hoping this is a new page for the royal family. I think the Queen's probably going to be over the moon. Every grandma wants another baby to hug and kiss and tickle toes and everything. So God bless them. I hope everything works out really well. We're going to bring our guest on pretty fast because he only wants to do an hour, and that's okay. But I do have a couple of things I want to remind people of. You'll be listening to the podcast and the recordings of this, some people. And in New Jersey yesterday, a kennel that, people bring their animals to when they're going on vacation, put a French bulldog out in that brutal heat yesterday for an hour, and when they checked on the dog, it was dead, and they are in big trouble for animal abuse. People have to remember, just because somebody says they love animals and they've got a kennel and all this, doesn't mean that they're actually good and that they actually care about your animal. It's just a matter of they want to make money. Animals are big money now. Everybody's making money off of them. So when you leave an animal with a kennel or anybody, please make sure that you know who you're leaving with. And again, we don't leave animals, children, or elderly in a car. When you're not in it, they don't belong in it either. An animal, child, or an elderly person can die within a few minutes because a car heats up like an oven. You're basically cooking them. So you don't want to be doing that. So be very careful. And if you see animals being abused or hurt or neglected, you see a horse that isn't being taken care of, you see people moved out, they had animals and they had to move out, go over and make sure they didn't leave the animals behind. Things are very hard right now, and I think our guest tonight is going to explain just how scary it's going to get. And when people get scared and you have to take care of children, sometimes you think, well, it's just a dog, it's just a cat, but starving to death doesn't feel any easier for an animal than it does for a human. So please, people, be mindful of animals. And we are in the last few weeks of summer before school starts. Children will go to water to cool down and they will drown, so please be very careful about children around water. Always keep an eye on children. They get into everything, and you can't turn your eyes from them. That's why they're children, you know. They just do what they think is going on. Our guest tonight is a blogger. He has the Economic Collapse blog, Michael Snyder. He has a book out, The Beginning of the End. It's a book about the future of America. It is a fiction book, but it's based on things that are happening right now. Michael, welcome to the Lair.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. It's a real pleasure to be with you.
I've been checking out your the book. I've been checking. Is it safe to say you're a little bit of a conspiracy person? You are very suspicious of a lot of things in the government?
Well, I tend not to take things at face value. I think things go deeper than most of us realize. And so, and then I also wanted to create an entertaining story. So what I've done is kind of created this mystery/thriller. It's a novel. It's something that our entertainment-addicted society hopefully can enjoy and interact with, because, you know, we know our society, they love a good story, whether it's Twilight, whether it's the Hunger Games, whether it's Harry Potter, whatever. They love a good story. So what I've tried to do is create a very interesting and fascinating story, but then also bring in a whole lot of truth throughout the story. So I call it faction. Fact kind of meeting fiction, and where hopefully people be very entertained by what they're reading, but then also along the way that I'm communicating some very important things about the economy, about the big brother, kind of how the government is spying on all of us, and just in the recent months we've had all these revelations about NSA spying, and it's turned out to be very timely. So I try to communicate a whole lot of things about where our society is headed, but hopefully in a very entertaining package.
Yeah, your book has three main characters, and one is the reluctant one who's kind of dragged into this, and at first he's kind of like most of us, you know. I totally understand what you're saying. We as a society now have become instant gratification. We also have become, I don't want to see it, I don't want to pay attention. I call it the Scarlett O'Hara syndrome. Fiddly-dee, I'll deal with it tomorrow. That's our society now. If we just don't look at it, maybe it won't happen. But in 2005, I said we were going to start crashing. And people that I tried to warn did not want to listen at all. And then in 2008, the housing went crash. Is that when you got the idea for the book?
Well, I actually started my site, the economiccollapseblog.com, back in late 2009. You know, it was after the financial crisis, and millions of people had lost their jobs, and millions of people had lost their homes, and people were saying, hey, I don't understand what's happening, and I know I'm not getting the truth from the mainstream media. And so the site, I started writing for the site, and it really started to take off. It really struck a chord, because people are looking for answers. They don't understand what's happening. They know that things are broken, kind of in their gut. They kind of realize this, but they can't really explain it. They don't really know, and the media is not giving them any answers. And so I've been writing the site on the site since about 2009. But the book I've just done in the past year. In fact, it just came out a couple months ago, because so many people have been asking me, saying, hey, when is this going to happen? What is it going to look like? So what I wanted to do is kind of paint a picture of what I believe is going to play out as we approach the next stock market crash, as the financial markets freeze up, as unemployment skyrockets, and all these things happen. How is it going to play out? What is it going to look like? I've tried to paint a picture in the book.
You know what it kind of reminds me, and I'm not saying you got the idea from it, but it's prophetic, kind of like The Stand by Stephen King. You know, and now we're seeing these viruses that resemble Captain Trips, you know what I mean? It's kind of a prophetic book. We're on a collision course. Would you agree with that?
Oh, we're definitely on a collision course, and I wanted to just didn't want to write a book. I wanted to say something important about the real world, and because right now I believe we're at the terminal phase of the greatest debt spiral in history. You go back 30 years ago, the U.S. national debt was about $1 trillion. Now it's nearly $17 trillion. Or you go back 40 years ago, and the total amount of debt, the debt of the federal government, state and local governments, corporations, businesses, consumers, the whole ball of wax. 40 years ago, it was about $2 trillion. Today, it is more than $56 trillion. So the total amount of debt in our system has gotten more than 28 times larger over the past 40 years. And so during that time, our economy has grown, but our debt, our total debt in our system has grown at a far, far faster rate. So we've got this gigantic, massive mountain of debt that's staring us in the face. And, at some point, this bubble is going to burst. And we saw kind of an initial wave happen in 2008. But then things kind of settled down. The Federal Reserve started printing money like crazy. The government started going into running trillion-dollar deficits, and they kind of propped things up for a while. And most Americans kind of thought, well, maybe everything is fixed. Maybe the people who are running things actually know what they're doing. Maybe our system really isn't fundamentally flawed. Maybe it's just, that was just kind of a one-time deal. It's over, and now things can get back to normal. Unfortunately, things have not gotten back to normal. In fact, our long-term problems are far worse than they were back then. And we're, like you said, we're headed on a collision course for economic and financial disaster.
I hear what you're saying, and I agree. But I also, when you compare us to back in 1950 and that, you're talking about a different population back then. Because right now, I see one of our biggest problems is we have more people taking out of the kitty than putting in. Back in the 50s, if you didn't have a job, everybody thought you were a dirtbag. When I was a kid, and I'm really old here, nobody would talk to you if they thought you were collecting some kind of welfare. Nobody. Because that was like shameful. Now I see so many people on welfare, so many people, and they're the same people crying the government has too much say. But the more you ask from a government, the more you say, feed me, clothe me, take care of my children, I can't afford a doctor, pay for my doctor, the more that government has control of you, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. The more dependence on government there is, the more government has control. And we have seen an absolute explosion in the number of people that are dependent on the government. For example, if you go back to 1960, the ratio of social welfare benefits to salaries and wages was approximately 10%. In other words, for every dollar that the American workers earned, the government gave out about 10 cents in welfare benefits. Fast forward 40 years later to the year 2000, at that point, the ratio of social welfare benefits to salaries and wages rose to approximately 21%. In other words, for every dollar that the American workers earned, the government gave out 21 cents in welfare benefits. Now, fast forward to today, just 13 years later, that number has gone up to 35%. In other words, in just 13 years, we've risen from 21% to 35%. For every dollar American workers earn, the government is giving out 35 cents to welfare recipients. And so, we've seen a complete and dramatic change in society. If you go back to the 1970s, there were only about 1 out of every 50 Americans was on food stamps. Now today it's about 1 out of every 6.5 Americans is on food stamps. And in the year 2000, just 13 years ago, there were only 17 million Americans on food stamps. Today there are 47 million Americans on food stamps. It's been a dramatic change.
It's staggering. And I'm not beating up people that lost their jobs, but I will say, and I don't know how you feel about this, but back when all these jobs were being outsourced, the reason companies were doing this is because we didn't want to pay a lot of money for our TVs. We didn't want to pay a lot of money for the electronics. You know, when I was a kid, you had one TV in the house, you had one stereo system in the house. Now everybody wants one in every room. They want iPods, they want computers, they want a whole bunch of stuff. And of course, that takes money. So then they say, well, make them cheaper so we can have all that we want, which means companies had to outsource to other countries, which meant we lost the jobs, so we still can't afford anything. Now, people are just losing jobs left and right. Companies are going under, and I blame a lot of things, but I also blamed greed on the part of the American citizens. They didn't know when they had it good, did they?
Oh, it's true. The American people, they kind of want everything now, and they don't care about the future. They don't care about the long-term implications. And so that is a big part of the problem. And like you said, we've seen so many good jobs leave this country. And a lot of those good jobs are being replaced by part-time jobs and temp jobs. And so we've seen this fundamental change in the workforce. And it's very difficult to support a family on a part-time job or a temp job. You know, what we need are good-paying full-time jobs. And so the media came out and said, oh, last month the U.S. economy created 195,000 jobs. Well, we need about 125,000 jobs just to keep up with population growth. But you look deeper in the numbers, and it's actually a lot worse than that, because the U.S. economy actually lost 240,000 full-time jobs last month. All of the gains were in part-time jobs and temp jobs. We actually lost 240,000 full-time jobs, these breadwinner jobs, which have been rapidly disappearing from our economy, and that's what the middle class is built on, these breadwinner jobs.
I call the unemployment statistics smoke and mirrors. I think that most people have no clue how it works. They're telling you how many people applied for jobs, for unemployment. They're not telling you how many have run out of their benefits and now just don't have any work, and they can't collect either. And so I call it smoke and mirrors. You know, it sounds like, oh my God, the unemployment, people applying for unemployment dropped 5%. They're not telling you how many people ran out of their benefits and now are getting nothing. What do you think?
Oh, I completely agree with you. You know, the truth is that we have not had an employment recovery. You know, in fact, what I would prefer to look at is the employment to population ratio. In other words, it's a measurement of the percentage of the working age population that actually has a job. Now, just prior to the last recession, it was about 63%. About 63% of working age Americans actually had a job. During the recession, that fell dramatically from 63% all the way below 59%, and it stayed there. Ever since the depths of the recession, it stayed between 58 and 59%, has not bounced back, has not gone back over that 59% barrier. And this is the first time in the post-World War II era that we have not seen the employment rate, I call it, bounce back. And so when they tell you that there's been an employment recovery, that's a complete and total lie. In fact, the number of full-time workers in the United States is still nearly 6 million below the old record that was set back in 2007.
And you're right about the part-time workers. Summertime workers are already getting ready to file because in another 4 weeks, maybe even 8 weeks, when all the lawns are no longer being cared for and pools aren't being taken care of, and summer stuff, air conditioning, your air conditioner breaks and you say, well, we'll sweat it out 2 weeks because the fall is here. So a lot of this summertime help is going to be unemployed again, and they're going to have to apply for their benefits again. And another thing that I see is a lot of people don't want to get off the unemployment because a job at McDonald's isn't going to give them what unemployment is giving them. Do you know, it's a catch-22. Yes, if I go for a job, because when you're working, they don't continue to give you unemployment. Hey, you got a job. Okay, so you're not making what you made here, but that's tough. You got a job. Live on that now, instead of trying to make it up, because unemployment isn't welfare, you know?
Yeah, it's true, and you know, what we've got today is that a lot of people are having to take jobs. You know, a lot of very highly educated, you know, talented people are being forced to take whatever they can get or go on unemployment or whatever, because our economy simply is not producing enough jobs for everyone anymore at this point. And so we've got this huge amount of unemployment. We've also got, you know, all these people working low-paying jobs. In fact, 53% of all American workers are making less than $30,000 a year. It's very hard to support a family on $30,000 a year, which is only $2,500 a month. Very hard to do that. And in fact, 1 out of every 4 American workers has a job that pays $10 an hour or less.
Yeah, and you're right. Highly educated people are now slinging hamburgers, which means people who are unskilled, they don't have a job. There's nothing they can do. They don't have the money to go to school. You know, back in the day, I remember somebody that used to work as a garbage collector. And he lost his job, and the guy doing his job now is a guy who has a lot of degrees and college and everything else. He's now a garbage collector, and he's bloody happy to be the garbage collector. But now that unskilled worker, he's out in the cold. Do you think it's like a conspiracy to destroy the American economy?
Well, I think we've made some very, very bad decisions which are crippling the middle class. You know, for example, you know, we've seen, you know, high-paying manufacturing jobs leaving this country, you know, by the millions. In fact, since 2001, we've seen more than 56,000 manufacturing facilities in this country shut down. You know, and so our economic infrastructure is being gutted. And today, you know, the types of jobs that are being created don't support a middle class lifestyle. For example, the top number one largest employer in the United States today is Walmart. Number 2 is actually a temp agency, Kelly Services, you know, providing temporary workers for companies. So these are the kind of jobs that are being created, and it's not good for news for the middle class. And what we've done is we've created the situation when we said, okay, we're going to go ahead and merge our economy with the nations around the world, such as communist China, where it's legal to pay workers less than $1 an hour with no benefits. You know, and this is who American workers suddenly have to compete for jobs with. It's a global labor force that we've been merged into. And so big corporations are saying, well, why should I pay an American worker $10 or $15 or $20 an hour plus benefits, plus the rules and regulations and taxes and this and that, when we can just move our facility to China, pay workers less than $1 an hour, and you know, and then the big corporation pockets the difference and pads their bonuses and so forth. You know, that scenario right there is really bad for the middle class, unfortunately.
Yeah, and so is, you mentioned benefits, and that is a big crux in the employment thing, because this is not something that's been new, where stores and companies have tried to keep hours down so that the employees didn't rate the benefits, the health benefits. I worked for J.C. Penney's 20 years ago, and they would try to deliberately keep me under 20 hours so they didn't have to give me health care. And of course, I ended up getting the health care, but if you went down 1 hour, you lost it the next week. You know, it was always a very precarious thing. This is something that companies have been doing for the last 25, 30 years, trying to get out of paying it. And I think people are against a rock and a hard place, because without insurance, you're not going to survive in this world. Because I'm just going to share mine. I pay $500 a month for Teddy and me to have insurance, and our co-pays run anywhere from $300 to $400 a month. That comes out of our $3,000 a month we get. And I don't know how families with a lot of kids are doing it, and that's just two of us. I mean, we're older and we have health problems, but the health problems, I don't understand what they're trying to do with the health. Either make it like universal health care or something. What are your thoughts on this healthcare stuff?
Oh, I completely agree with you. If you don't have health insurance, you can go into the hospital to the emergency room for a problem and almost be instantly start racking up thousands of dollars of medical bills. And there's very few families that can afford that kind of a hit. Unfortunately, the percentage of Americans that are covered by employment-based health insurance continues to decline. You go back to 1999,
right.
Back then, 64% of all Americans were covered by employment-based health insurance. Today, it's declined to 55%. So a smaller percentage of families, of people are covered, and that means, so many people are going and they're finding out that they're becoming bankrupt by these, just because so many families are living on the edge today. We've got according to one survey, 76% of all American workers are living paycheck to paycheck. When you're living to paycheck, you don't have a cushion. So you go in, you get hit with a huge hospital bill, all of a sudden you're wiped out.
Unless you're not a legal citizen, and then all kinds of charities jump in, or that kind of thing, because I've seen that over and over and over again, where I've been said, you're going to owe us $1,000, but then somebody who's not a legal, and the reason is because Americans don't like to see children suffer. All children should be covered, and I'm a little bit miffed that I'm expected to pay through the nose, but somebody who's not a legal citizen of this country can walk in and get carte blanche, have their babies, have all their bills expunged, because it's not nice to let their children suffer. We've got a double standard here, and the American citizen is the one going down the tubes.
Oh, I totally agree with you. We've got a system which is very unfair, and which is, it greatly benefits certain classes of people, and other classes of people are left out in the cold. Middle-class families, even if they have health insurance, a lot of times health insurance only goes up to a certain limit or doesn't cover certain things. So, when you're talking about medical bills, according to a report that was published in the American Journal of Medicine, medical bills are a major factor in more than 60% of the personal bankruptcies in the United States. And of those bankruptcies that were caused by medical bills, approximately 75% of the people actually did have health insurance. So a lot of people are thinking, well, health insurance is going to protect me. But a lot of people are going bankrupt because of medical bills that their health insurance only covered maybe a portion of it, and then they were expected to pay the rest. So our system is very insidious, and it's hurting a lot of middle-class families.
Yeah, we have to go to break, but I was just up the VA with Teddy, and there was a lady there with her husband, and her husband has just been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and she looked at me and she says, I have to sell the house because I can't afford his care now. And she said the same thing. She's paying about $500 a month for insurance for him and herself, and still she's the medicine, the co-pays, everything, she's just getting killed. And she looked at me and my heart broke, because I'm in the same position. We both have health issues, and she says, I have to sell my house now. She says, because I know next year I won't have the money for his medicine anymore. So that's where the average American is in the United States. We're going to come right back, and we're going to be talking about the book and your characters and where they can get it and everything. And the song I picked for after the commercial is Barry Maguire, Eve of Destruction, because I thought, you know what? It's the perfect song for the topic. We'll be right back.
To Jurassic Park.
Well, hello there. This is Stan, inviting you to listen to Jurassic Park, where we dig up the old bones of rock and roll, 50s, 60s, 70s, and beyond, and then carefully rebury them. Thursday nights, 8 Eastern, on GCR.
Okay. We're having big discussion here in this in the room while you guys are listening to the music. Our guest, Michael Snyder. I thought Eve of Destruction is the perfect song for this because we are literally at the eve of destruction for the United States of America. Europe is already going under, belly up. I mean, they are going under. I have friends, we normally have in the chatter a lot of people from England, and they are struggling over there, saying, you know, that they're struggling to keep going, and that they're things are being taken away from them. And America, we've been hanging on, but I don't think we can hang on anymore. Do you, Michael?
Well, I think we're rapidly heading down the same path that Europe has gone, where, you know, we're seeing unemployment rates of 27% in both Greece and Spain. You know, they're where we're headed eventually. And, you know, the Federal Reserve has kind of pumped up the system with wild money printing, and the U.S. government has been running these trillion-dollar deficits. But, you know, we're rapidly running out of time. Meanwhile, Wall Street, our financial system, has been transformed into the largest casino in the history of the world, where they're gambling enormous amounts of money, and most of the time the banks win, and so they make lots of money and things are great. But if they lose at some point, like we saw in 2008, that things can get very, very bad very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, it seems like they're borrowing money. We are actually borrowing money from countries that owe us money. And that makes no sense to me. How do we borrow from all these countries that we have supported? We've sent them all kinds of help, and now we have to borrow from them after we've rebuilt them. And I'm going to get pretty political here. Germany started a war with us. Japan started a war with us. We rebuilt Germany. We rebuilt Japan. We rebuilt most of Europe because of the two wars, and now we have to borrow money from them? And then they say no because we're a bad risk. We've set ourselves up for such a fall that I'm afraid we're not going to recover from it now.
Oh, and it's absolutely true, and so much depends on the health of our financial system. You know, they call these banks too big to fail, and it's true because we've become so dependent on them. If they do fail, then credit freezes up. Suddenly people can't get loans to order new products to sell to their customer or to meet their payroll or to expand their business. And so the health of these big banks is absolutely critical. Unfortunately, these big banks have decided to go out and be incredibly reckless. You know, for example, today, let's just take a look at Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs today has total assets of about $114 billion, and that sounds like a lot of money, but they've got total exposure to derivatives of more than $41 trillion. In other words, their exposure to derivatives contracts, which are essentially risky bets, is more than 362 times greater than their total assets. So basically every single day these major banks are kind of walking the tightrope, And if they get across the tightrope that day and they win, well, they make money, they can have big bonuses. But eventually, if they fall and a lot of these derivatives contracts start going bad, there's not going to be enough money in the world to fix them. And when our biggest banks go down, our entire financial system, which is based on credit, is going to freeze up. We'll see unemployment skyrocket. We'll see millions more Americans lose their homes, and nobody will be able to get a loan for a car, a home, or anything else because there will be fear and panic and nobody will be lending any money. So most Americans don't realize how truly vulnerable our financial system really is.
Every year I go and we get our taxes done, and every year the girl who does it says, "You're living within your means." Most Americans do not live within their means. They all have credit card debt of $10,000, $12,000 more. And I don't know where their brains went. When I was a child, there was no rule that you deserve to go to Walt Disney World or Cancun or whatever every summer, this vacation crap where everybody travels to another country for vacation. I mean, when I scrimped and saved to go to Ireland, it took us years to do that. We went last year for the first time. And for crying out loud, my family is from there. We still have a farm there, but I don't have the money to just run back and forth. But Americans, they are instant gratification. There's no control over saying, we can't afford that. I can't afford a brand new phone right now. I'm not going to put out $400 for a new phone. But Americans aren't doing that. They're just charging it all and then defaulting on it. And when you say the big banks are too big to fail, the little people are failing too. And it kind of, in perspective, is the same thing because we can get sued, but nobody's suing these big banks.
Yeah, and what you said about the American people is so true. Back in the days of my grandparents and even my parents, if they wanted something, they saved for it. But today, people are just like, oh, just put it on the credit card. So we've seen consumer debt in the United States rise by 1,700% since 1971. And today, 46% of all Americans carry a credit card balance from month to month. And people don't realize how damaging these credit cards can actually be. For example, if you're an average American household and you're carrying an average balance of $15,956 in credit card debt from month to month, and that's what the average balance is for those that carry credit card debt, and you're paying an average rate of 12.83%, and that's about the average rate of what people are carrying on their credit cards. If you do that for 40 years between the ages of 25 and 65, you'll end up paying to your credit card company more than $2.6 million. So people are saying, I want it now, I want it now, I want it now, but they don't realize how incredibly damaging that can be.
Mm-hmm. And being late, then they tack on all these charges for being late, and I can't even imagine having $15,000 worth of credit card debt. I mean, I've bought a brand new car back in 2006. We're not buying another new car. God better bless this baby and make her run forever, because we're just too old to be pulling that garbage off with what's going on. But people, 2 cars, they have to have 2 cars. They have brand new phones. And you know what really ticks me off? People on welfare that are getting checks every month from welfare, and they're on Medicaid, but these girls are all walking around with kids that they're having and we're paying for, and they all got brand new BlackBerry phones.
Yeah, in fact, the government has this program where they give out free cell phones to people on welfare, where people, they not only get the phones for free, but they get minutes every single month for free that they don't have to pay for, and the federal government pays for it all. So it's
So where's the incentive for them to get a job?
It's true.
Where is
in
the
fact,
incentive?
In some states, in some states, you're actually better off living off the government than getting a job for minimum wage if you do the calculations and you know how to game the system and you know how to really work things and sign up for all the programs you can possibly sign up for. It's actually more beneficial in certain states to go on welfare than it is to work for minimum wage.
And I think that is one of the biggest problems we are having outside of illegal immigration. Illegal immigration, I'm not talking about the person, because we're Irish. We came here, we stepped off of Ellis Island, and the old man said, okay, it's just like Ireland, it's raining, this is where we're staying. And the first thing that the family did, everybody got jobs. They got jobs, and they worked, and they became citizens. They became citizens, and the taxes got paid, and everything got paid. But an illegal, a person here illegally, a person from another country who's living here is not paying taxes. Yet they're draining the sources for the taxes. Like you say, they don't have insurance. They go to the hospital, they have a baby, they have a heart attack, they have whatever. It's all covered and written off, and this is a huge drain. Then you have what I call career welfare families. They're people who have worked the system. They have children. Now their children work the system. These people are having 5 and 6 kids, and now they're getting the money for 5 or 6 kids. And there's no incentive to force them to go to work, because everybody says, well, you can't expect those children to starve. No, take the kids off them, put them in a home. It sounds cruel. It sounds nasty. But when I was a kid, my parents worked their tails off because they didn't want us taken away. And I don't think the government is forcing people to take care of their own crap. Excuse my expression, but, life is a bunch of stuff. And you take care of your responsibilities. Stop asking everybody else to take care of it. But we've actually groomed 2 generations now who want everybody to take care of them.
Oh, it's very true. And then, one of the other aspects of the immigration problem is that, we don't know who's coming into this country. And so we've got a lot of gang members, a lot of criminals, a lot of drug pushers coming in. Meanwhile, we are keeping the hardworking people, a lot of the hardworking people that want to come into this country out, and because they want to do things the right way. And we're saying, no, you can't come in. But then the people who are just jumping the border, we're saying, oh, come on in. And so the FBI says that the number of gang members in this country, most of them illegal immigrants, increased by 40% between 2009 and today. And so now we have 1.4 million gang members living in this country. There's 100,000 in the city of Chicago alone. Violence is escalating in these communities, and so most of it being caused by illegal immigration. And yet the federal government says, oh, we don't want to protect the border. We don't want to make sure everyone comes in through the front door, but that's what we need to do. We need to make sure everyone's coming in through the front door so we know who's coming into this country.
We need Ellis Islands again. We need places where they have to come in, and if you don't come in there and do it the right way, you're thrown out of the country. Your book takes a group of people down the dark alley where they watch. They're blissfully unaware of what's happening. Then they wake up and realize everything is falling apart. Do you, and I don't want you to give the book away because I want people to buy it. It's on Amazon.com, and the name of the book is The Beginning of the End. You can get it a Kindle edition. There's also a printed edition, right?
Yeah. There's a paperback version as well as a Kindle edition. Right now, it's only available on Amazon.com. Although if you do go to your bookstore and specially request that, they have a way of ordering it. But I wrote this book because I want it to be not something that can just entertain people that get it and kind of preach to the choir, but I want it to be the kind of thing that people can say, hey, I'm going to give it to a family member for their birthday, or I'm going to give it to a friend who maybe they won't sit down with you and have a half an hour discussion about the problems this country is facing, but you give them the book, and then as they're being entertained and enjoying the story, then all of a sudden they're learning all this stuff about the economy, about stuff the government is doing, about the corruption in our system, about, I've included so much facts and information and truth in the book. It's a great way to kind of influence a family member, touch a family member with, and do it in a very non-threatening way.
Yeah, and it puts me in mind of Soylent Green, where society has broken down. It's every man for themselves. You take them through the survival mode. They have to end up going into survival mode. And on your site, you have a lot of that. Do you know what you're going to do? Military surplus, survival supplies, emergency food. You have all these links to these different things, and also a link to a book about, surviving the Prepper's Cookbook, Survival Mom. Stuff like, because I personally am very frightened we're going to have complete social breakdown, and there will be rogue groups going up and down the roads, and they will be taking what they want by force from people, and I'm really afraid it's getting dangerously close to that.
Oh, I agree with you. And we've seen kind of the tip of the iceberg of this with some of the flash mobs and some of the protests and so forth. But I believe it's going to get so much worse. After the next stock market crash, I believe another wave is coming of the economic collapse, like 2008, but I believe it's going to be even worse. And we're going to see the financial markets collapse and freeze up, and then unemployment is going to skyrocket, and that's going to, a lot of people are going to become very angry and frustrated. And desperate people do desperate things, and people will take to the streets. There will be protests and riots and crime. We're going to see crime rise significantly. And so I believe, that there is reason to be concerned about these things. And that's one reason my wife and we moved out to Idaho. We live in a very remote rural section of Idaho. And, I believe that the system is failing. So anything we can do to become more independent of the system is a good thing. For example, one practical thing people can do is build up an emergency fund. That way, if you lose your job or your business goes under suddenly, you have a 6-month emergency fund sitting there that can provide a cushion that'll enable you to get to the next thing. Well, the people, back in 2008, millions of people didn't have that. They lost their jobs, then they couldn't pay the mortgage, then they lost their homes. So you need to have an emergency fund. And then in the longer term, whatever people can do to, not be so dependent on the overall economy. If people can learn how to grow a garden, grow some of their own food, or install alternative energy sources in their home, or store up emergency food and supplies, one thing I recommend to people for the long term is to get some gold and silver. If we see problems with the U.S. dollar, gold and silver have historically held their value over long periods of time. So those are just some things that I recommend for people as a way to kind of insulate themselves against the storm that is coming, because I believe a great economic storm is coming to this country. Unfortunately, I don't have faith in the leaders, our political leaders or our financial leaders, and I don't believe the storm is going to be averted. So I'm encouraging people to get prepared, and I believe it's a message of hope. People say, well, you're doom and gloom. But no, I believe it's a message of hope to understand what's coming and then to get prepared for it, because those that aren't getting prepared for it and don't see what's coming, they're going to get blindsided by everything that's coming, and then they're going to give into despair because, they're not going to have anything to fall back on.
See, this is a huge catch-22. This is like rats chasing their tails, because I live in New Jersey, and I live at ground zero where Sandy hit. So everything around me, friends lost their homes, everything is still, there are still boats laying on the sides of roads because nobody's had the money to get them collected. You know, now we have Governor Christie, telling everybody, go to the shore, spend money at the shore. That's New Jersey's backbone, because we have all the boardwalks and everything. But to go to the shore and one of the boardwalks, you're talking about spending maybe $300 for a day for the rides and food and stuff. It's not cheap to go to these boardwalks. They're very, very expensive. And he's telling people, go support the businesses at the boardwalk. Go support our shore businesses. But he's telling people who have lost their jobs and are unemployment to go do this. Now, if we don't, the businesses are going under. And that's going to be more people going under. And do you see what I mean? We seem to now be rats chasing our tails.
Oh, it's true. And the government always wants you to go out and spend money, and they're saying, oh, go spend. And they seem to want people. And the Federal Reserve has pressed interest rates down to the floor, and that penalizes savers. So if you try to save money in the bank, what are you going to get? A fraction of 1% on your money? So they're penalizing people who want to do things right and save money and try to build up, some emergency cash. But instead, they're saying spend, stimulate the economy. But that's not always the wisest thing to do.
Mhm. Yeah. It's getting to be a balancing act, and I'm starting to think that we're going to see a lot more violence. And I think I really liked on your blog page, which is your blog site is the economic collapseblog.com. But if people just Google your name, Michael Snyder, they're going to find it. It just comes up automatically, all of that. But I thought it was really nice the way you wrote about love your neighbor as yourself and appeal for reconciliation, because this whole thing down in Florida, with everything that's going on and people feeling the way they feel, the hardworking people are going under, and the people who just abuse the system are kind of scooting by, and then this kind of thing happens, and it actually becomes an outlet to vent all that pent-up anger. And I think that something terrible happened down there, but I'm hoping people will stop attacking each other. These were two morons who found each other. And whatever happened there, we can't do anything about it. A jury made a decision. And it's going to have to resolve itself. And I don't want to see races starting to fight each other, because we have so much that's going wrong right now that this is not a good thing for us. So I really liked that you were asking for people to, whatever you think about the trial, try to calm down. Don't write terrible things because you're frustrated. We're all frustrated, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why I wrote the article, because there's so many people that want to divide us and pit us against one another. But this is a time we need to come together, because, if we start, if even one group of people starts hating another group of people, we all lose, But we win when if we can learn to love one another and forgive one another and come together as a nation, then we all win. And that's what we need to do. We, no matter where we're from, what we look like, what our background is, we need to learn to get along with one another, love one another. We're all Americans. If you cut us, we all bleed red blood on the inside. And so we need to embrace one another, come together as a nation, because we're facing some tremendous problems as a country. And so if we're, as it says, a house divided will fall, but if we can come together, perhaps we have a chance of solving some of these things. But if we're divided against one another, we're going to be in big trouble.
Let me ask you one last question. I have been waiting for the president to say, look, we're in a depression. And he did use the word depression, but he grazed it, trying to make light of it. How long do you think it's going to be before this Great Depression, and they finally have to say, look, we're in a depression, guys? Because they're not saying it. They're avoiding saying it.
And they are, and our politicians, they want to look good. They don't want to say, oh, we failed and things are really bad now. So they want to put that off as long as possible. But, and there are thousands of moving parts to this thing, so it's hard to make exact predictions. But, in terms of a time frame, I believe the next wave of the economic collapse is rapidly approaching, and I believe between now and the end of 2015, we're going to see it. It's going to strike, and we're going to see, I believe, the stock market crash. I believe we're going to see unemployment go well up into the double digits, and so that's the time frame that I would expect this next wave to strike between now and the end of 2015. But that won't be the end of it. I believe it's going to continue to play out. We're going to continue to go down. So this is a long-term deal, but the next wave is definitely rapidly approaching.
And families have got to get over the I need my space crap and start sticking together, because that's the only way anybody's going to make it through this. Families are going to have to pull their weight, get together, and stop the bickering, because that's the only way anybody's going to make it through this. It's that old story about the soldiers going through the country and asking for rocks to make soup, and the peasants feel sorry for them, so one guy gives them a carrot and the other gives them a potato, and suddenly they each just give them one thing, and then the army feeds the entire town on the soup they made from all the bits and pieces that different people brought in. There is a real lesson in that, and families have better get their heads together and start understanding that's the only way we're going to make it through the next 10 years here. And when we become that weak, when the United States becomes that weak, we stand a very good chance of being invaded by somebody else. Because they've never had anything, so they've got nothing to lose, right?
Well, I definitely believe we're headed for some really hard times in this country, and I think people are going to be shocked by what happens. I think there's going to be, just a wave of where people are like, I can't believe this is happening. And so, society is becoming more unstable. Everything, the entire world is becoming increasingly unstable. And so, hopefully people will get ready, will get prepared, because I think that the years ahead are going to be very, very interesting, but they're also going to be very, very challenging as well.
Yeah. Again, the book is The Beginning of the End, Michael T. Snyder, Snyder, and you can find it on Amazon.com, and his site is The Economic Collapse. Are you prepared for the coming economic collapse and the next Great Depression, which I started telling people about in 2005. I hope that everybody maybe picks up this, because for Kindle, it's only like $3 something, or it's cheap for Kindle to buy it. What is it, $3.99? And that kind of thing. So, but the paperback is like $15. His site is full of all kinds of information, which is really cool. I want to thank you so much for coming on tonight. I know I promised that I would only tangle you up for an hour. Thank you for coming on. Is there anything you wanted to add before you leave?
Oh, I very much appreciate you having me on the program. It's been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed it. And, yeah, I just want to underline what you said. I hope people will come and check out the site. It's called theeconomiccollapseblog.com, or if they just go to Google and type in The Economic Collapse, it's the first result that comes up. And the site is constantly being updated with new articles, and people get into great discussions about these things. So I hope people will stop by and check it out. And once again, thank you for inviting me on the show. You've been a tremendous host, and very much enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I love talking to someone and getting is some real ideas out there and some real information. It's so important, and we have to start teaching. They're saying in the chat, thank you to you for coming. So all you have to do is hang up and you're off the hook, and like I said, I'll email you all the information tomorrow. Okay?
Okay, great. Thank you so much once again, and yeah, definitely email me the link, and I very much appreciate it, and it's been a lot of fun. Thanks.
Thank you. Night. I'm going to go to break now, guys. Caesar must be paid, so we're going to do a commercial. And I've met this group, Mike Daly and the Planets, and they're pretty cool. And they have a song, "Kill a Clown." No, not really. But I thought, considering we've been talking about the government tonight, "Kill a Clown" was a perfect song. So I'm going to go to break, and I hope you enjoy Mike Daly and the Planets.
Radio, your music choice.
And that's Mike Daly and the Planets, and their site is, hang in there, MikeDaly.com, and that was "Kill a Clown," which I think, considering the government's mostly clowns, maybe that's not a bad idea. I don't know. We have a couple of things. Geraldo Rivera evidently is in some kind of sick contest with that congressman, that ex-congressman Weiner, who posted all those tweets and half-naked pictures. Geraldo Rivera posted on his tweets a picture of himself with a towel covering Big Boy, and he said he's... hang on. What happened? Hang on. Sorry. He evidently feels that being... Maybe it's music for Geraldo, right? He's very proud of his physique. He says 70 is the new 50. And he's proud of his picture, and he said he doesn't know what Erica and the family are going to do about it. They're probably going to be pissed, but at my age, don't ask me. I guess, he's trying to stay in the news. I don't know. In retrospect, they said Rivera can always blame alcohol because Twitter users did not share his inspiration. So he can always say that he's, back on the juice again. I don't know. But new stuff has been released by Weiner, and it's very graphic, and some of the stuff that he was sending women was like reading a really raunchy book. They warned it was very graphic, and man, this guy, he's the dog-faced boy, but man, he thinks a lot of himself. And I was reading it today, and he still wants to run for governor or mayor of New York, whatever. And I personally think, let's be honest, what they do in their bedrooms, that's between them and whoever they're in there with. But when it becomes public, it's an embarrassment. When American politicians become an embarrassment to the American people, it's time to step down and get out of politics. And that's the problem. Back in the day, before social media, before all the TV stuff and everybody had pictures and you could buy out people, there was always politicians having their relationships, cheating on their wives, doing whatever, but it wasn't out in the news. The average person never heard anything about it, and we were really happy about that, because a thought of Abraham Lincoln, getting it on with somebody, that's an image I don't want in my head, man. And but now it's all over the news. It's all over the news now, and so that's a problem, because they're becoming an embarrassment. More and more and more, these politicians, President Clinton, Weiner, all these guys, they're all an embarrassment to the American people. They show other countries we have no control. We can't be trusted. We have no couth. And that's the big problem with it. So that's a big, huge problem Geraldo Rivera, he's just, I don't know what's wrong with him. I guess he just needs a lot of attention or something. A friend of mine, Jerry Lowe, on Facebook posted this, and I read it and I broke up laughing. A woman caught with marijuana in a sanitary napkin, ABC News reported, Manila. A woman was arrested for attempting to smuggle dried marijuana leaves into city jail. The suspect, 44-year-old Janet Della Vega, tried to smuggle the illegal drugs in by stuffing them in her sanitary napkin. The idea was she was going to get them to her live-in partner, who I guess would use them for collateral or to buy his way out of problems. Last week, a woman was arrested for hiding 7.7 grams of methamphetamine inside a jar of shrimp paste. On a scale of 1 to 10, I think it was ingenious of her to use a tampon because nobody wants to look at that. You stand there and say, well, yeah, you can look down there. Oh, no, thank you. So in a way, she was brilliant. Jerry said, thank God it was dry. So Jerry is a good friend of mine. He's really funny, and I died laughing. But this is what people are now. What are you gonna do? On another thing in the news, a whale was caught up in a bunch of fishing nets, and a woman in a rowboat managed to untangle it, and after it was untangled and came up for air, it actually came up and kind of like came out of the water to thank her, and she pet it and kind of hugged it, and then it went back in the water. So who says animals don't have souls? The news. Taco Bell announced it's going to be the first fast food chain to drop kids' meals. I think they're a waste of money anyway. It says it's going to discontinue toys and food combos at some locations this month and across the brand by next year. Fast food chains are criticized for junk food and using toys to entice kids to the store because they really don't eat the food and they're only interested in the toys. So Taco Bell has decided they're going to stop it. They're not going to bribe kids to come there. And if kids are going to come there, they're going to have healthier choices to eat. KFC is also playing with the idea, but says it will continue to offer its little bucket kids meal, but instead they're going to stop the toys. A lot of them are offering parents the choice of fruit or a healthy snack instead of a toy. I think it's really good, but I think a lot of these places are going to go out of business because you're going to eat grease-laden chicken, so really the health thing went out the window the minute you said KFC or Taco Bell or anything else. They're not healthy foods. That's just the way it is. So, but at least they're not bribing kids to come in. And this kind of ties in with what we were talking about tonight. About 360,000 people filed for jobless claims July 6th. And they said it's because of the, while it shocked a lot of people, they said it's because people who work summer jobs are getting ready to be laid off and starting their paperwork. And that's what we were saying before. And auto factories are retooling during the summer, so a lot of those people are being laid off until there's a job available with the auto companies. So, that's what's going on in the great land of woebegone. So anyway, that's our show for tonight. We don't have another guest, and I thought that I'll play one more song, and I'm going to do our exit, and I'm going to let everybody off the hook. So Let me get this set up because you know I'm so good at this. And let me play,
Thank you for visiting me at my lair. You can always contact me at www.asylumsgate.com. Again, thank you for visiting, and God bless you and yours.
Yet, and when people get scared and you have to take care of children, sometimes you think, well, it's just a dog, it's just a cat, but starving to death doesn't feel any easier for an animal than it does for a human. So please, people, be mindful of animals. And we are in the last few weeks of summer before school starts. Children will go to water to cool down and they will drown, so please be very careful about children around water. Always keep an eye on children. They get into everything, and you can't turn your eyes from them. That's why they're children, you know. They just do what they think is going on. Our guest tonight is a blogger. He has the Economic Collapse blog, Michael Snyder. He has a book out, The Beginning of the End. It's a book about the future of America. It is a fiction book, but it's based on things that are happening right now. Michael, welcome to the Lair.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. It's a real pleasure to be with you.
I've been checking out your the book. I've been checking. Is it?
The opinions and views expressed in the following presentation do not necessarily reflect those of GCR Progressive Internet Radio Management, staff, or our affiliates.
Toto? I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
Welcome to Mo Banshee's Lair, Visionary Talk Radio on GCR Progressive Internet Radio. Fair rockin' your world.
Welcome to Mo Banshee's Lair on Game Con Radio, GCR Internet Radio. We played the national anthem for England, and the reason is a son has been born to the House of Windsor. Prince William and the Duchess of Cambridge, Catherine, the former Kate Middleton, gave birth to an 8-pound 6-ounce baby boy yesterday, and the prince was in attendance. He is in the military, as most of you know. Princess Charles and Camilla, the Duchess of Prince Charles and Camilla, the Duchess of Cornwall, arrived at the hospital today because they let them sit with the baby all day yesterday to bond. I think it's wonderful. All a parent ever hopes for is a healthy child. I don't care who you are. All you want is a healthy child. And praise God, the baby is all right, the mom is all right, and now they can start going through the sleepless nights and all the things that come with being a parent. God bless them. I hope that their lives are much more charmed than the past family, the last 20 years. I'm hoping this is a new page for the royal family. I think the Queen's probably going to be over the moon. Every grandma wants another baby to hug and kiss and tickle toes and everything. So God bless them. I hope everything works out really well. We're going to bring our guest on pretty fast because he only wants to do an hour, and that's okay. But I do have a couple of things I want to remind people of. You'll be listening to the podcast and the recordings of this, some people. And in New Jersey yesterday, a kennel that, people bring their animals to when they're going on vacation, put a a French bulldog out in that brutal heat yesterday for an hour, and when they checked, safe to say you're a little bit of a conspiracy person. You are very suspicious of a lot of things in the government?
Well, I tend not to take things at face value. I think things go deeper than most of us realize. And so, and then I also wanted to create an entertaining story. So what I've done is kind of created this mystery/thriller. It's a novel. It's something that our entertainment-addicted society hopefully can enjoy and interact with, because, you know, we know our society, they love a good story, whether it's Twilight, whether it's the Hunger Games, whether it's Harry Potter, whatever. They love a good story. So what I've tried to do is create a very interesting and fascinating story, but then also bring in a whole lot of truth throughout the story. So I call it faction. Fact kind of meeting fiction, and where hopefully people be very entertained by what they're reading, but then also along the way that I'm communicating some very important things about the economy, about the big brother, kind of how the government is spying on all of us, and just in the recent months we've had all these revelations about NSA spying, and it's turned out to be very timely. So I try to communicate a whole lot of things about where our society
on the dog was dead, and they are in big trouble for animal abuse. People have to remember, just because somebody says they love animals and they've got a kennel and all this, doesn't mean that they're actually good and that they actually care about your animal. It's just a matter of they want to make money. Animals are big money now. Everybody's making money off of them. So when you leave an animal with a kennel or anybody, please make sure that you know who you're leaving with. And again, we don't leave animals, children, or elderly in a car. When you're not in it, they don't belong in it either. An animal, child, or an elderly person can die within a few minutes because a car heats up like an oven. You're basically cooking them. So you don't want to be doing that. So be very careful. And if you see animals being abused or hurt or neglected, you see a horse that isn't being taken care of, you see people moved out, they had animals and they had to move out, go over and make sure they didn't leave the animals behind. Things are very hard right now, and I think our guest tonight is going to explain just how scary it's going to